Hi, and welcome back to our video series, My Sewing Lessons, for the next lesson in your step-by-step introduction to the world of making clothes. In the previous lesson with the bandeau top, you learned the basics of cutting out fabric. In this video, you'll become familiar with sewing machines and how to stretch fabric pieces together and neaten edges. We will show you these skills while you make this cool patchwork scarf. We are making our model with the Burda B35, which is a super sewing machine for your first projects. For this patchwork scarf, we've selected various fabrics from C Poly. This is also the perfect project for using up fabric scraps. As most fabrics shrink a bit after washing, for the best results, wash yours before you begin the project. In addition to the fabric, you will need thread in a matching color, tailor's chalk, sewing machine needles, a set square, a tape measure, straight pins, fabric scissors, thread snips, paper scissors, colored tape for marking, a seam gauge, and an iron. The first thing to do is cut out pattern pieces A through D for the patchwork scarf. We show you how to cut them out using the smallest piece of fabric D as an example, and then you can cut out the other pieces the same way. Place the fabric flat on the table with the side that will later be the outside of the scarf facing down. This side is always called the right side of the fabric. You will find the measurements for the pieces and the instructions in your magazine. The measurements already include seam allowances of 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch. This is why you can draw the measurements of pieces A through D using tailor's chalk and a set square directly onto the fabric pieces. For long pieces like these, make sure that the lines stay straight when you draw them and that they're always parallel to each other. Next, use your fabric scissors to cut out the pattern pieces along the chalk line. Then use tailor's chalk to write the letter of the relevant piece onto the wrong side of the fabric piece, which will make it easier to stitch together later. Before you start sewing, you need to prepare your sewing machine. Insert a needle number 80 into your sewing machine. Now use a matching thread to fill a bobbin and put it in place. Next, thread the upper thread in your sewing machine. As each machine is a bit different, consult the user manual of your sewing machine for specific instructions. Set a straight stitch with a stitch length of 2.5 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch. Use a small piece of fabric to test the setting. If the seam is not neat or looks too loose, you can adjust the thread tension on your sewing machine until the stitches are perfect. And now you can start sewing. Place fabric pieces B and C together at the long edges and pin them. The right or nice sides will be together on the inside. When pinning fabric pieces together, always insert the straight pins through both layers of fabric and place them at a 90-degree angle to the fabric edge. This way, you do not have to remove them when stitching. Your sewing machine can simply stitch over the straight pins. When you first start out, it's not very easy to stitch a straight line at a distance of 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch from the edge. Our sewing machine has lines engraved on the throat plate to mark various distances. If your sewing machine does not have engraved lines, you can stick a strip of colored tape next to the presser foot as a guide. Do not begin stitching directly at the edge. Instead, place the fabric layers beneath the presser foot a bit farther away. Begin stitching the seam with 3 to 4 back stitches. Consult your user manual. On our machine, we use this lever. Back stitches are important to prevent the seam from opening at the beginning and end. Next, press the seam allowance apart to ensure that it stays flat. Now place the pieces flat on the table with the right side facing up. Place a long piece, D, sideways on the pieces you had just stitched together. Pin the edges together, and proceed as you did in the previous step. Make sure that the allowances on B and C that you pressed apart remain flat. Now stitch the edges together like you did in the previous step. Press the seam allowances apart here as well. Your scarf is almost finished. Now place the square piece A on the piece you just stitched together so that the wrong sides of the fabric are together. The right or nice sides of the fabric on the outside. Pin the outer edge of the two pieces of fabric, making sure the edges match. Stitch the outer edges using a wide zigzag stitch to prevent them from fraying later. This step is called neatening. To neaten, set a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine and first test it on a scrap of fabric. Next, stitch along one edge and make sure that the needle is always inserted right next to the edge. When using a zigzag stitch, remove the straight pins before the machine can stitch over them. When you come to a corner, move the needle carefully into the fabric using the hand wheel, consult your user manual, and keep it in the fabric. Now raise the presser foot slightly and turn the fabric. This way you can continue stitching along the next edge. Repeat until you've neatened all 4 edges of the fabric. You can carefully trim the excess fabric at the edges, but do not cut into the stitches. To finish, iron all edges until they are smooth and use your thread snips to remove all hanging threads. You've just made your very own patchwork scarf and completed this lesson. Now you're familiar with your sewing machine and have learned to sew different pieces of fabric together and how to neaten fabric edges. In the next video, we will combine what we've already learned and make our first garment. Until then, have fun sewing!